NWP Radio.
You're listening to NWP Radio, a production of the National Writing Project.
NWP.
Well, welcome back, everyone. It's another year for the National Writing Project's The Right Time, and we hope our listeners aren't ready to push us off the mountain peak just yet. We promised you we would be back, and we are. I'm Brian Ripley Crandall, director of the Connecticut Writing Project at Fairfield University, and like many of you, the summer months were packed with teacher institutes, summer programs for youth, conferences, and occasionally time at the beach with a paddleboard, which I'm not going to do now because it's cold in the Northeast. And then it was back to school time just like that, zip, zap, zoom. And as a result, The Right Time had a little vacation. This is why we're super excited to get things going for another school year. We are thrilled to be celebrating another year of the National Writing Project's The Write Out with a theme of poetry for the planet. So we are more than happy that today in our studio we have a prolific writer who has spent her career wondering, thinking, and questioning with the young people she writes for. If it is a curiosity, it seems like a great idea for the next book. Oh man, it's so good to be back in the studio with the brilliant, wonderful Tanya Baker, executive director of NWP and co-host of The Right Time. And I'm thinking of wonders. So how is our resident Wonder Woman doing these days?
Brian, I don't know how long I'm going to let you keep writing these scripts. I'm holding on to my super stamina and strength for another year of National Writing Project work, but I have no idea where my invisible jet and my lasso of truth went. But I do know that we've used our collaborative superpowers like the Wonder Twins to host another year of The Right Time. As you know, The Right Time primary goal is to bring authors of children's and young adult texts together with teachers who love to teach their work. We read as writers and write as readers, and we hope our show is useful to classrooms everywhere. We want to celebrate that this is the 4th year of our show and another fantastic way to celebrate the 50th year of the National Writing Project. We couldn't be more grateful to kick off the 24-25 school year by hosting author Kate Messner, our Write Out author ambassador, together with Kim Douillard, director of the San Diego Area Writing Project. We're definitely moving coast to coast once again with the National Writing Project tradition. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Woo! So I am fortunate to be able to introduce tonight's author. New York Times bestselling author Kate Messner is passionately curious and writes books for kids who wonder too. Her titles include award-winning picture books like Over and Under the Snow, Up in the Garden and Down in the Dirt, and The Brilliant Deep, as well as books for older readers like Breakout and her forthcoming novel in verse, super excited about this, The Trouble with Heroes. Kate also writes the popular Ranger in Time chapter book adventures, the Ferguson Zeke Easy Readers, and the History Smashers graphic nonfiction series, and leads the multi-author team behind the Kids in Mrs. Z's Class chapter book series. Wow. Kate is the 2022 recipient of the Empire State Award for Excellence in Children's Literature. Her books often appear on state board award lists and have been New York Times notable Junior Library Guild, IndieBound, and Bank Street College of Education Best Book Selections. That was a lot of adjectives to describe your brilliance. It's wonderful. Her debut novel, The Brilliant Fall of Gianna Z, won the E.B. White Read Aloud Medal, and her science-themed picture books have been honored with the Green Earth Book Award, woo woo, and Riverby Award for Natural History Writing, and have been finalists for the American Academy for the Advancement of Sciences Subaru SB&F Prize for Excellence in Science Writing. I'm telling you all, we have a guest with us today. Kate is also this year's Write Out author ambassador, and you can learn more at her website, www.katemessner.com. Woo, woo, 50 years of NWP, and we got Kate Messner with us. Woo!
Yay. We also have the amazing Kim Douillard. She is the director of the San Diego Area Writing Project, as well as a classroom teacher. She is currently teaching first graders at Cardiff Elementary School in San Diego's North County. When not teaching and directing, you can find Kim outside, often with her camera around her neck, walking, hiking, exploring, and always taking photos of beautiful vistas, interesting wildlife, and even the bugs her students point out. She posts these images regularly to her Instagram at KDO602 and writes about teaching, learning, and exploring on her blog, Thinking Through My Lens. Kim and her students are also always amazing participants in Write Out. So Kim, I'm going to turn this over to you to start us before your interview with an idea about how we might write.
Okay, this is exciting. Writing is just as exciting as going out with my camera. So imagine right now that you're stepping out the front door and entering into another world. And as you step out, either in actuality or in your mind, look around. Use all your senses. If I was checking with my students, they would easily tick off those senses. What do you notice? The breeze on your cheek, the snail creeping up the side of the porch, that loud raven that's shouting from across the street, the smell of dinner cooking next door. After making a mental list, pick one of those things to write about. Maybe you'll write a description, a short poem, or a piece from the perspective of the snail or the raven or the neighbor or whatever was on your list.
Thanks, Kim. That's a great prompt. Teachers, if you want to stop and do some writing here, you can. But we are going to keep going. And Brian and I are going to shut off our cameras, and Kim and Kate are going to talk about writing.
Hi, Kate.
Hi, Kim. I'm so excited for our conversation.
Me too. My students and I have been reading your books. I've been reading them for years, but my current students and I have been reading them over the last few weeks to make sure that we could really enjoy all that was there. So these are questions they're asking and I'm asking. So we're curious about where the under, over, up, down structure came from in so many of the books that we read. So we've read Over and Under the Snow, Up and Down in the Garden. I have a whole selection of them here that my librarian found me. So this one's my favorite.
And that was the first one.
And as a Southern Californian, it was mind-blowing. So we're just curious about like where did that structure come from? Did you come up with a structure first, or did you find it as you were writing?
No. So to be honest with you, your favorite is also my favorite. It has a special place in my heart, even though I love the newer books too, because this was the very first Over and Under book. And this is a book that I actually drafted while I was teaching middle school full time. I used to be a 7th grade English language arts teacher for 15 years. And I taught on an interdisciplinary team, which was a huge gift. I worked with a science, math, and social studies teacher, and we collaborated on so many different projects. And every winter, we would take our students on a snowshoe field trip into the Adirondack Mountains. And talk about writing outdoors. We would get bundled up. Sometimes it was 5 or 10 degrees. We'd get the winter coats and the hats and the mittens and the scarves. And head out on snowshoes, hiking around these trails close to Saranac Lake, New York. And the activity we loved to do with the kids was have them spot animal tracks and other signs of animal presence in the woods, right? We would see tracks in the snow. Sometimes we would see evidence of, a red squirrel having nibbled on a pine cone. Sometimes we would see animal scat. And so what our students would do is take notes and observe and use all their senses like you're talking about in the writing prompt today, and then try to come up with a diary of one animal they saw evidence of on the field trip. So I was on one of those field trips with my kids and snowshoeing around, and gosh, I love field trips. I always tell students when I do school visits, if you love field trips, you should think about being either a teacher or a writer, because those two jobs, you get to take field trips your whole life. So we were hiking on our snowshoes that one year, and we were hiking along one of the trails, and we came to these little bitty tracks in the snow, the tiniest tracks that led up to a hole in the snow and then disappeared. And when we saw that, our naturalist, our guide who was with us, got really excited. She said, "Oh my goodness, look at this. We have had a visitor from the subnivean zone." And all the kids said, "Whoa, what is that?" And she explained that the subnivean zone is the phrase we use to describe that secret network of tunnels and caves under the winter snow. And she explained that the whole time we'd been hiking 3-4 miles that day, there had been a secret, invisible world happening under the snow. Well, I have to tell you, when she said that, my writer's imagination lit up in a big way, and I couldn't stop thinking about it the whole rest of the hike. Now, I have to tell you, Kim, I almost always have a writer's notebook with me, and quite often I have more than one. I have 5 or 6 stuffed in my backpack. But on that particular day, I had left my writer's notebook back at school, and I had one piece of paper in my pocket. It was the attendance list. It was the list of students I was supposed to not lose in the woods. But I also had a little pencil. And when we got back to the school bus after I took attendance and checked to make sure all the kids were there, they were, I wrote the very rough draft in bumpy school bus handwriting of a picture book about the subnivean zone. And that over and under structure that weaves through all of the over and under books, 7 of them now, I came up with on the school bus on the way home from the field trip. Many, many, many rewrites later, that scribbled draft turned into this picture book, which is so beautifully illustrated by Christopher Silas Neal, the illustrator for the series.
I love that story. And I'm going back to the classroom and telling my students that story. I think one of the reasons I love this story so much, now you surprised me because you live where it snows and your students still didn't know about the subnivean zone, right? But I live where it never snows. And so my students barely know what snow is. So we love that book because, it's about all the special parts about snow.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
it's
so exciting.
fascinating when I travel around doing school visits because, if I'm in the Adirondacks, there are always children who have been snowshoeing, who see animal tracks in the snow, who like to follow animal tracks in the snow. But I do school visits all over the world. And so a couple of years ago, I was in Cairo in Egypt doing a school visit. And I said, you don't really get to see this too often. And the hands went up and they said, yes, but we see the same kinds of tracks in the sand of the desert.
Mhm.
And so it's amazing the connections we can always make when it comes to the natural world.
Yeah, interesting. I wanted to talk a little bit about that whole idea of these nonfiction books for students because I feel like I've taught a long time now and they've gotten better over the years. And I'm wondering too, like you probably wrote that nonfiction book because you didn't have a nonfiction book like that to share with your students too. And I feel like for my very young students, nonfiction books can either be amazing or they can fall a little flat, right? Sometimes they're just too long and it's really rough to get through them. And the one thing that I really, really love about the entire series of the Under and Over and Up and Down books is that the story, there's a story. First of all, I love the story, and my students love the story. In fact, they are sure you're a mom, is what they told me, because they said there's moms in a lot of these books. So they're pretty sure you're a mom. And so they like to follow the story. And then the other real highlight is we get to the end and we're like, wait a second, what? A larva is eating fish under the water in the pond? How can that possibly be? And we can go to that animal and read a little bit more about it. We don't have to read every single thing. We can just key in on what our attention is what we're interested in at that moment. So I don't even know if I have a question about this. What my students really wanted to know is they wanted to know if the story part is true. Like they get that the facts are true, but they wanted to know if the stories were true. And I know we read a little about the author and, that you visited this place or that place, but they're still not totally convinced. They told me they don't think the stories are true, but they do think the facts are true.
Interesting. Yeah. So I love how perceptive they are because you're absolutely right. Books like Over and Under the Snow and Up in the Garden and Down in the Dirt, they're not traditional nonfiction in that they're a list of facts about animals, right?
Right.
It's more, it's a genre that I like to call informational fiction. right? Because there is a story, right? There's a narrative. There's a child
Mhm.
and their grown up exploring nature together. And those stories are always inspired by my own experiences, both with my students and with my own kids who are grown up now. But the whole time they were growing up, we spent so much time in nature, including on research trips for many of these books. You know, my kids came along on field trips to Costa Rica and, you know, to the mountains and all kinds of places like that. So the stories are very much inspired by my own explorations, but there are different characters in the stories. There are different families in the stories because one of the messages that was really important for the illustrator, Chris and I, to send is that nature belongs to everybody. It belongs to all of us. And no matter where you live in the world, there's nature, right? Even if you're in a city, an urban environment, you can still walk out your front door and there's urban wildlife in our parks and, you know, in our skies and on our sidewalks. We're actually doing a future over and under book. We're finishing up the editing right now called Over and Under the Park. That's all about that urban
Mm.
wildlife because I visit a lot of schools and libraries to talk about this series. And when I'm in a big city, kids always ask, hey, you should write a book about the nature in cities. That's for us because we might not get to go to the rainforest or the desert or the mountains or where it snows. You know, but everybody can experience nature. And so that's part of the reason that there are different characters in the different books, different kids and their different grown-ups, to get that idea across that nature belongs to everybody. So the information, the facts are kind of embedded in that story, as well as that section at the end. Every book has this section that you noted, Kim, called About the Animals, which is more information. And this, at this point, it is straight nonfiction, right? Just kind of
Right.
just the facts, ma'am,
Yep.
about all of the animals in the story. And so this one is really for the curious readers like I was when I was growing up. I would read something in a story and say, well, I want to know more about that bird or that lizard. And so that there is a lot more information in the back matter of each book.
Yeah. We really appreciate that because it's like, wait a second, we're curious about that. That can't be true. Let us find out more, right? And so highlighting those animals, I think, is really, really important. I love too that you just brought up the the fact that nature's for everyone and that you don't actually have to go to an extraordinary place to be in nature and to really experience the world around you. And that's I feel like I'm so lucky that I teach little kids because their sense of wonder is so incredibly contagious. And I mean, it could be the spider that we almost stepped on the way to the playground, or we found a lizard in the tree the other day. I didn't even know I don't usually find lizards in trees, but we have this big magnolia tree and it was just sitting there like in the crook of the tree. And the kids are like, there's a lizard right there.
I love it.
So yeah, so I was wondering, my question for you is like if you could write a book about something really ordinary, like not the really I just feel like the things you wrote about are so they feel extraordinary and maybe they are ordinary to somebody. But if you were going to pick an ordinary thing to write about, what would you pick and what would you want readers to know about that really ordinary thing
Yeah, I mean, you know, the interesting
or
thing
place?
about this series is that all of these ecosystems, whether they are, you know, the mountains or the rainforest or the desert, these ecosystems are somebody's backyard, right? Over and Under the Canyon is inspired by the Slot Canyon at Anza Borrego State Park, which is in your backyard and, you know, close to San Diego.
Absolutely.
And so there are lots of different ecosystems, and there's wonder in all of them. And I think that's the reason that we decided to focus on a park for the next book coming out, not next fall, but in, let's see, in 2027, I think. Don't hold me to that. I don't have my schedule in front of me. But that's why we decided to focus on an urban park to celebrate the wildlife that we all see wherever we are, anytime we step out our door. You know, it doesn't have to be on some great wilderness hike or some huge field trip that's, you had to take an airplane to get to. Anytime we step outside or even, open the window or look out the window, nature is there for us. And I think that's a huge inspiration and a huge source of curiosity and wonder, but also a huge comfort to kids, to readers and grown-ups too.
Yeah, and I think that it really connects with the Write Out mission, right? That right outside our front door, there's so many opportunities. And I always want to encourage teachers to just find a place on your school ground. Just there's got to be some place out there that you can find that there's something interesting to look at and to just go out and really study and find those things. And I think your books inspire that idea of just finding the wonder around you.
Oh, I hope so. I really love that. I do a lot of school visits focused on this series, and I get to do writing workshops with kids all over the world. And one of the things we do is their teachers often like them to come up with their own over and under story about the place that they love, that they live and love, and the nature that they get to see every day. And so when we go outside with our notebooks to write, the sort of the default thing we tend to write about is what we see, right? What we observe with our eyes. And so kids will go outside and say, well, I see an ant on the pavement and I see this. And one of the things I love to do, and it's just a quick 5-minute writing strategy, is I have them write for a few minutes and then say, okay, now for the next minute, maybe you've been writing about what you see. For the next minute, you have to close your eyes and only listen. And the only thing you can write for the next minute is about the sounds that you hear. Okay. And then we'll take a minute and do that. And kids will write down and we'll say, okay, what did you hear? And somebody will say, well, I think I heard a cricket, or I heard a rustle in the bushes and I'm not sure what it was. And then I'll say, okay, now we're gonna smell for a little while. And we smell, right? And we can smell, depending on the season, maybe springtime, we can smell leaves and flowers and fresh earth, things like that. And then we listen to pay attention to what we can feel, right? Whether it's the breeze or the grass tickling our knee, or maybe an ant crawling on our wrist, something like that. But isolating those senses and having kids spend a minute writing about each one is such a great way to bring that sensory language into students' writing. And it's great. It works for students of any age, from, pre-K and first graders, right on up to adult writers.
Well, and plus it really pushes that stamina too, right? So that if you move from one sense to another, then you have more to say too. And then students can figure out like how to best describe that place if you have more to write with instead of less.
Yeah,
Which
anytime the clock turns, it's sort of a second win for writing.
yeah. And just an opportunity to say more and think more and maybe even change your perspective a little bit, which seems like a great idea. So it leads me to my other question, which is really about your writing practice. And you kind of hinted at it already when you showed you flipped out like 5 notebooks, right?
This is a fraction. These are actually my mountain notebooks. I have a novel coming out April 2025 called The Trouble with Heroes. That is about a kid who vandalizes a cemetery. He gets in trouble, and it turns out the headstone he destroyed belonged to one of the first women to hike all 46 Adirondack high peaks. And in lieu of pressing charges, the dead woman's daughter offers the kid an alternative, and that is he can hike all 46 Adirondack high peaks in a single summer with her mother's dog. And so it's this kid who finds himself sentenced basically to go on 46 really difficult hikes. And I wrote a lot of this book on those 46 hikes. I'm actually what they call an Adirondack 46er, somebody who's climbed all 46 Adirondack high peaks over 4,000 feet, which is what Finn's trying to do in this story. And so many of those poems, were scribbled in my notebooks. I've got these lighter ones, I've got my heavy notebooks, but I've got these lighter ones for backpacks on long hikes too.
Oh, that's nice. So that was really what I wanted to get at. It's like, what is your writing practice? Like, I think one of the things that a lot of teachers in the writing project struggle with is they know how powerful writing is, and they struggle to have a consistent writing practice, right? Teaching takes a lot of time and energy. Many people have families as well. So like, where do you fit your writing into the day? And then as you as a writer, like, what does your writing practice look like? So I get that you have a part of it that's when you're out in nature and ideas come and you're scribbling things down. I'm guessing there's more to it than that. So I'm just curious about that. And I'm always wanting to like collect other people's writing practices to add to my own to see if I can establish my own writing practice in a, I don't know, more sustainable way.
Yeah, I mean, so my writing practice has changed an awful lot over the years. My first 6 books, excuse me, were published while I was teaching full time. And so in those days, I had young children and I was teaching full time. So my writing day started at 9 o'clock at night after my kids went to bed, and lasted until 10 or occasionally 11, maybe midnight if I was really on a roll and I could keep my eyes open. But typically it was an hour or two most nights a week. When I transitioned to writing full time, obviously that changed. I had more deadlines, I had more projects. And so a typical day for me now is I usually do 2 big chunks of writing during a day. So that's different from, the idea scribbling that happens every hour of every day in my notebook, regardless of where I am. But as far as actually drafting and revising and meeting deadlines, usually I will get up in the morning, get some exercise, and put in one writing session of 3 hours or so in the morning. Then I break for lunch. I like to tell kids I give myself recess. I like to get some exercise and some fresh air at lunchtime. And then I'll put in another session of 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon before I wrap up for the day. And obviously that varies depending on the situation. I sometimes will go on a writing retreat with other writers. And that's lovely because we will, rent a big old house somewhere and stay for a few days. And everybody pretty much writes from sunup to sundown, except for meals when we talk about writing. So it kind of depends on the day, but usually for me, I'm looking at two writing sessions, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. But again, totally different situation when I was teaching. I wrote my first 6 books in an hour or two a day. I remember I was at a writing workshop at a conference once with Lori Haltz Anderson, who's one of my writing mentors. And Lori said, even if you have 15 minutes, set a timer on your phone. Even if you have 15 minutes, you can write a novel in 15 minutes a day, because those 15 minutes add up to almost 2 hours over a week. And over a month, it's going to be a full day of writing. And over a year, it's going to be a lot of pages. So I think the big thing when you're trying to sneak it in and you've got so much work to do and you're bringing work home from school and you've maybe got a family and other obligations too, is to not limit writing to that big chunk of time that you need, right? And I've been guilty of this too. I've had times where I've said to myself, well, I can't get started now because I only have 10 minutes or I only have 20 minutes. I need to wait until I have 2 hours. And if you wait for the perfect time to write, it might never come. So my advice is to get good at grabbing those 15-minute chunks, even set a timer, and that's writing. It counts.
I have to squeeze one more tiny question in. What do you do when you get stuck? When you don't have an idea and you don't know what you're going to write about, and you're like, I feel like I should be doing some writing and I just can't get myself unstuck enough to write.
So my honest answer for that question is I go and I eat all the chocolate chips out of the cupboard. But actually, that's not the healthiest answer to the question, and that rarely solves the problem. The thing that actually will solve the problem for me usually is stepping back and asking myself why I'm stuck. Because sometimes I'm stuck because I haven't done enough research or I haven't done enough pre-writing, and I need to return to an earlier phase in the writing process to get unstuck. And I think that's a really useful thing for writers of all ages to do, right? If you're not sure what to do, maybe close the laptop or close that draft, set that draft aside, and just get out a notebook and scribble and draw and things like that. So that's one thing. Sometimes I'm stuck because honestly, I've been sitting too long. And if I get up and I go for a walk for 20 minutes, that helps too. So those are kind of my two go-to answers if there are no chocolate chips.
Perfect. Great advice, I think.
So one of the things that I'm dealing with right now, that my dog is out of practice of these recordings, and she thinks it's playtime, and she's got her squeaky ball in her mouth, but I'm afraid she's going to start barking at me. So I'm going to go real fast. This was
That's a
wonderful.
story, Brian.
This is wonderful. Carol's been on many shows, usually jumps on my shoulder. I just want to say that you did something tonight that has not happened often on this show in your writing processes, and you just talked about the balance of your own ecosystem of the day, your ecological writing schedule, of going outside, of stretching, of making time, of processing. Because I think so many kids that we work with, even college students that we work with, they think snap your finger is supposed to be a finished product. They don't realize that people are chiseling all the time. And what I love the best is that you're scribbling drafts in your head every hour of every day. You're always thinking about it. And it doesn't matter if you're going to go play a game. It doesn't matter if you're going to do a puzzle or if you're going to make dinner. You're ruminating your ideas. And that is the truth. And I've not heard anybody say that before. So thank you for that. I believe we have a writing out prompt.
We do. Oh, sorry. Oh, geez. Hopefully somebody will edit out my opposites. Oh, that was it. Sorry. Kim, we have a writing out prompt.
Okay. And I feel like Kate, you and I were like on the same wavelength. The things you were talking about are the things that I was thinking about having people write to. So I'm thinking about Write Out. It starts October 13th officially, although I would say I've been doing Write Out with my students since school started back in August. But it's right around the corner. And I would suggest using something like Over and Under the Snow or another one of Kate's books as a mentor text and to inspire you to write about a place you know well. And Kate, I just heard you say that this is a prompt you use a lot of times on school visits.
Yeah.
So as a prompt, you could borrow Kate's over and under or up and down structure, or you might consider another set of opposites: inside, outside, night, day. There's so many of them: happy, sad, quiet, loud. And maybe after you do this bit of writing, writers, maybe you'll be brave and share your writing in the studio with our Write Out group. That would be so cool. And Kate, I hope you'll be poking your head in there from time to time and seeing what the studio folks are doing over with Write Out.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Oh my goodness. Kate and Kim, I also want to say I loved this interview. I loved how focused, Kim, you were both on your students' questions for Kate and on really talking to Kate as a writer. And it's just been such a joy to listen to you both. Right. I see you are still muted, but you often have a final word you'd like to say.
Well, I think, what I'm so overjoyed by is not only because I know the Adirondacks and how beautiful that is, but I just love that you were a teacher who found 15 minutes a day, an hour a day, while parenting, while teaching, while grading, while dealing with administrative stuff. You kept true to your passions, which is kind of the heart of what the writing project is about. So many of us are always looking for ways to get words to paper because that's why we got into this profession, and we love teaching, but we also love writing. And so it's good to have role models like you to show this is how it gets done. This is how it gets done.
Thank you, Brian. It's so good to be back with you doing Write Times again. Kate and Kim, I can't thank you enough for such a great interview and for such a great resource for people who are excited about Write Out in October. And Kate, having you as as an ambassador, a writer ambassador for Write Out is like, it's thrilling for us at the Writing Project, and it'll be great for all the kids who love your work and are so excited to be able to connect with you in this way and write maybe in your style. So we'll be looking for all kinds of exciting Write Out work coming out of this or connected to this interview. And my job always, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Joy. I just wanted to say it's an absolute joy for me too. And especially thanks so much to Kim for your thoughtful questions. And please tell your kiddos that I said thank you as well. I really appreciated their thoughts.
Yes.
I will do that. They wanted to be here today, and I'm like, yeah, it's past, school's already out today. I'll have to tell you about it tomorrow.
You can tell them that we're all thankful for their careful reading of Kate's books and their good questions. My last job always before we sign off is to thank the listeners to The Right Time, and to remind people that The Right Time is part of the National Writing Project ecosystem and that you can find us in a lot of places. Please sign up for our Right Now newsletter so that you will never miss a Right Time or important information about Write Out. Join our community at thestudio.nwp.org, where Kim told you could bring your over/under writing to share with us. And you can find all of our podcasts at NWP Radio, bit.ly/NWP Radio. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a great night.
You're listening to NWP Radio, a production of the National Writing Project. NWP. NWP Radio.